Hey everybody, it's Monday night and I'm not doing anything special here with the native tank. I'm just giving it a water change and that's it. I'm not messing with the filter. I'm not even going to get in there and wipe down the glass or anything. But as far as what I got going on in the fish room today, that's pretty much about it. I did shoot a video this morning about my loaches. I don't know if I'm going to publish it or not. It rambled on to about 15 minutes and I wandered all over the place. It was pretty typical of one of my videos. But there was a couple of places where I said the wrong word. One example was I said species instead of specimen. And instead of assuming everybody would understand what I meant, it was one of those cases where that was really going to throw the listener off because it changed the meaning of the sentence and it still could have applied and it got confusing. And so, like I said, it just kind of wound up going into being more of a chat about what I wanted to do with my loaches and so on and so forth. So I might post it, but I'll definitely have to retitle it because it doesn't really sort of give you a whole lot of information about, if you're thinking about buying a loach. That was the whole point of it, was to give the viewer an idea of what my experience keeping the loaches has been like. And while I did do that, like I say, it was one of my less focused videos, I'll call it. So, I don't know, I might post it, I might reshoot it, I don't know. One of the things I do know is that I very much need to get in this tank and get the loach out of it. That's kind of what caused the other video to sort of devolve into me thinking out loud about what I want to do with the loach. If you're not familiar with my tanks and you haven't been following along, I recently put a red tail loach in this tank. I'd moved it over from my gourami tank where it had been reclusive for a long time, but it had never been violent. It had just been reclusive. And when I moved it in here, my purple spotted gudgeon, speaking of the devil, is getting beat up pretty good. You can see the marks all over his back. He doesn't look any worse today than he did yesterday, so maybe he's beginning to learn his lesson to stay away from the loach. That doesn't really change anything. I've still got to get the loach out of there. The loach is definitely not happy. One of the things I thought about in the other video was the red tail loach. When it was in the other tank, there were other loaches in that tank. And I spoke a lot in the video about how most loaches seem to get along as long as they've got other loaches. It doesn't have to be the same species, just so long as they have other loaches. And the red-tail loach doesn't seem to be that way. He seems to need other red-tail loaches. I did some research today, and various websites say the same thing, that they need to be in company of their own, not just other loaches. They really do need to be with other red-tail loaches. So maybe the violence in the other tank was less because there was other loaches around, and I just kind of assumed that it was not very outgoing. Now that it's in a tank that has no loaches in it, maybe we're seeing a different level of aggression and unpleasantness. So even if the gudgeon has learned to stay away from the loach is still not a happy camper, and I don't want the fish being in there if it's going to be just, aggressive and miserable and hiding and so on and so forth. So, at some point, I need to get the loach out of there, but then the question comes to what do I want to do with it? Part of me wants to just get rid of it, but that's going to entail a drive and a bucket and an air stone, and I've got work to do down in that area, and it's just a lot more of a pain in the butt than simply running down to the fish store real quick to get rid of this fish. So I don't know. I don't know if I really want to even get rid of this fish. I've had it for about 5 years now, so it really is kind of part of my fish family. I don't have too much sentimental attachment to my fish, but that is one of the ones that I've had for a long time. So I've considered putting it in this tank. There are some larger loaches in here that it would, it would have some other loaches for company. They are the clown loaches, but there are two large ones in here. And then I've got a smaller one that pretty much hides all the time now that there's two great big ones in here. There's no other fish in here really that would be susceptible to getting damaged by it except possibly my Synodontis here, and I have a feeling my Synodontis could probably hold its own. against that loach. And I also think my synodontist probably wouldn't bother that loach. That loach would just bury itself in a cave somewhere and we'd probably never see it again. So that might be an option if you are familiar with this tank. This big piece of wood right here is sort of convex or concave, depending on which side of it you're on, I suppose. Either way you slice it, it creates a very large cave area underneath, and I can actually stick the whole gravel vac, the whole entire plastic part of the gravel vac disappears down underneath of that piece of wood. So I've got options. I could always put the thing back in the gourami tank. I have made some changes to the gourami tank. Some big changes to the gourami tank. And while I was in there making the changes, that's when I got the red-tail loach out. He more or less lived underneath of this big piece of wood down here. I know it's dark and it's hard to see, but there's a big piece of wood comes down and it goes all the way into the back of the tank. It's basically a log or a big root stump. And he burrowed down underneath of there, he or she, I don't know whether it's male or female, burrowed down underneath of there. And we more or less never saw it. It would come out occasionally to feed. When there was food in the tank, he would sort of be aggressive with the other fish, grab it some food, and then dart back and vanish and disappear again, and we wouldn't see it again until, weeks or months later I'd get another little glimpse of it. So if I put it back in here, am I going to get the same kind of behavior? Is it worth it? Do I want to do that? So, I don't know. There's no other large loaches in this tank for it to be compatible with. I would say my little clown loach, which has more or less taken to hiding back here. I see its tail sticking out occasionally from underneath of there. So I might need to give the clown loach another little companion, because since I've got only the one clown loach in here now, it seems to have gone to ground. I don't see it very much. And then, of course, in my 125 that we were just looking at, I do have 3 clown loaches, and the small one has more or less started hiding right in this little cave area in there. I can't tell whether he's in there. Yep, he's in there. So he more or less lives in that little cave area now that there's 2 big clown loaches. So apparently size is part of whether or not they're going to get along, because the species is the same. That's a clown loach right there, but it does, like I say, that little one has gone into hiding since these 2 big ones are now here in the tank. And in the other case, the other small one has gone into hiding. So ideally, I'd like to get the small one out of this tank and put it over in the gourami tank we were just looking at, but I don't know if that's going to be feasible. Getting in here to catch it might involve tearing this whole tank apart. Obviously that would require probably the same sort of thing in the other tank, but I've got a plan with the other tank. I think I got a way of doing it without, I'm not talking about putting a trap in there or anything like that, but it hides underneath that piece of wood, and if I can just lift up that piece of wood with a net in the right place, it might be as easy as simply shooing it out from underneath that piece of wood and having it dart right into my net, and we'll scoop it right out. So I don't know. Like I say, I'm just kind of thinking out loud. We're more or less just at the moment waiting on this tank to finish it draining. I'm going to drain it a little more than it is now, and then we're going to go ahead and just start filling it back up. Like I said, we're not going to do anything major in here today. My black ghost knifefish tank is starting to look beautiful again. My 2 off-wax grazers, I'll call them, the 2 Plecostomus-like fish, my rubber lips. You can see one of them right there on the log in the back. They've been doing their job. I treated this tank with the ChemiClean red cyanobacteria treatment, or the ChemiClean aquarium treatment for red cyanobacteria. I will put a link down below if you're interested in it. It once and for good wiped out everything in this tank, and once everything got killed off, then my off-wax grazers started going to town, and they're getting all my leaves nice and clean again. They're getting the woodwork nice and cleaned up. The rocks are starting to shine again. You can actually see the rocks hiding in there and peeking through the leaves. So I'm really happy with the way this tank is starting to turn out. Again, if you're interested in that ChemiClean, I'll put a link down below to purchase it on Amazon. Totally worth it. It will really, really do the job on your tank. So I'm going to wrap that up and call it good. We're going to go ahead and get the tank started filling back up. And while I could probably stand here and ramble for another 10 minutes while the tank fills, I am not going to. Maybe I'll start working on getting that loach out of there or something. I don't know. We'll see. But make sure you're subscribed. That way you won't miss anything I got coming up. Whether it's catching that loach or just doing water changes like this or whatever. You never know what you're going to get with me. It's kind of hit or miss. I just shoot whatever's on my mind, and you all are welcome to follow along with me. So don't forget, this one's my native tank, in addition to all the other ones we looked at. So thanks again. See you real soon in the next one.